chosen one. What I'm about to reveal will completely transform your understanding of every devastating loss you've experienced, every heartbreaking removal you've endured, every painful ending you've survived. Because what felt like destruction wasn't destruction at all. What looked like God taking away was actually God making space. What seemed like divine punishment was actually divine preparation. You lost everything. Not because you were being diminished, but because you were being expanded. Not because you were being reduced, but because you were being enlarged. Not because you were being emptied for the sake of emptiness, but because you were being emptied to create capacity for more than you could have received while still holding on to everything you lost. God was making room in your hands, in your heart, in your life, in your schedule, in your mind, in your capacity, in your future. Room that couldn't be made while you were still clutching what needed to go, still holding what needed to release, still maintaining what needed to end. You were holding things that looked valuable but were actually limitations disguised as blessings, restrictions masquerading as security, ceilings pretending to be foundations. And God, seeing what you couldn't see, knowing what you didn't know, understanding what you couldn't comprehend, remove those things not to hurt you, but to help you, not to punish you, but to position you. Not to destroy you, but to develop you. You lost everything. Your relationships that you thought were permanent. Your job that you believed was your destiny. Your financial security that you assumed was guaranteed. Your health that you took for granted, your plans that you were certain would unfold exactly as designed, your dreams that you were convinced would manifest precisely as imagined. Everything, gone, stripped away, removed forcefully, suddenly, completely. And in that removal, in that loss, in that devastation, you felt abandoned by God, forgotten by heaven, forsaken by the divine forces you thought were protecting you, blessing you, guiding you. But you had it backwards. The removal wasn't abandonment, it was attention. The loss wasn't forgetting, it was remembering. The devastation wasn't forsaking, it was positioning. God was making room for more. More than you lost, more than you had, more than you imagined possible, more than you dreamed achievable, more than you believed you deserved. But that more couldn't come while your hands were full of less, while your heart was occupied with limitations, while your life was consumed with what needed to go to make space for what needed to come. Tonight you're going to understand exactly what God removed and why, what was taken and what's coming, what you lost and what you're gaining. You're going to see that every loss was strategic, every removal was purposeful, every ending was necessary. You're going to recognize that you're not being punished by loss, but prepared through loss. Not being destroyed by removal, but developed through removal. Not being diminished by ending, but expanded through ending. God was making room. And what's coming into that room, what's filling that space, what's occupying that capacity is worth everything you lost, exceeds everything you had, surpasses everything you imagined. Let me take you back to before the losses began, before the removals started, before the endings commenced. Your life was full. Relationships filled your time. Job consumed your energy. Financial security occupied your thoughts. Health was something you didn't think about. Plans structured your future. Dreams directed your present. Everything was in place, organized, predictable, manageable. You were comfortable, not necessarily happy, but comfortable. Not necessarily fulfilled, but secure, not necessarily thriving, but surviving adequately enough that you weren't looking for major changes, weren't seeking dramatic shifts, weren't requesting divine intervention to rearrange everything. But God was looking at your life differently. God saw what you couldn't see. Your relationships were draining you more than filling you, taking more than giving, limiting more than liberating. Your job was consuming you in ways that prevented your true calling from emerging. occupying time that needed to be available for your real assignment, channeling energy that needed to be directed toward your actual purpose. Your financial security was creating false confidence in human provision instead of divine provision, generating dependence on earthly sources instead of heavenly sources, producing trust in money instead of trust in God. Your plans were boxing in your future, limiting possibilities to what you could imagine, restricting opportunities to what you could conceive, confining destiny to what you could design. Your dreams were actually scaled-down versions of what God intended, reduced expressions of what heaven planned, minimized manifestations of what divine purpose prepared for you. Everything you had was good, but good was preventing great. Acceptable was blocking exceptional. Fine was obstructing magnificent. And God, unwilling to let you settle for less than divine design, began the removal process. The first loss came suddenly. A relationship ended, not gradually, abruptly, not with warning signs you recognized, with shocking finality. Maybe it was betrayal that ended it. Maybe it was death that removed them. Maybe it was their choice to leave. Maybe it was your necessity to end it. However it ended completely, devastatingly, painfully. You grieved, you questioned. You wondered why God allowed this loss, why heaven permitted this pain, why divine protection didn't prevent this ending. But while you were grieving the loss, God was creating space. That relationship, as valuable as it seemed, was occupying space needed for relationships coming that would actually align with your destiny, support your calling, enhance your purpose. That person, as important as they appeared, was consuming energy needed for people arriving who would genuinely celebrate your growth, authentically encourage your development, really participate in your elevation. That connection, as significant as it felt, was taking time needed for connections forming that would actually propel you forward instead of holding you back, push you higher instead of pulling you down, strengthen you genuinely instead of weakening you subtly. God removed them to make room, not because they were evil necessarily, but because they weren't aligned with where you were going, compatible with who you were becoming, suitable for what you were called to accomplish. And as painful as their removal was, as devastating as their departure felt, as heartbreaking as their absence proved to be, that empty space in your life was necessary for what was coming, essential for who was arriving, required for the connections God was sending that couldn't come while that space was still occupied. Then came the second loss. Your job ended, not with promotion you expected, with termination you didn't anticipate, not with the advancement you deserved, with removal you didn't understand. Maybe it was firing that ended it. Maybe it was company closing that removed it. Maybe it was your resignation that concluded it. Maybe it was circumstances that forced it. However it ended completely, financially devastatingly, identity-shakingly. You panicked, you stressed, you wondered how you'd survive financially, who you were professionally, what you'd do purposefully. But while you were panicking about the job loss, God was creating capacity. That job, as secure as it seemed, was consuming time needed for your real work, occupying energy required for your true calling, channeling focus demanded by your actual purpose. That position, as prestigious as it appeared, was defining you by title instead of by calling, identifying you by role instead of by destiny, limiting you by job description instead of by divine design. That career, as successful as it looked, was building someone else's dream instead of your own vision, advancing someone else's mission instead of your purpose, fulfilling someone else's goals instead of your calling. God removed it to make room, not because you failed, but because you succeeded there long enough to learn what you needed, but staying longer would prevent what you were called to build, create, accomplish. And as financially devastating as that job loss was, as professionally disorienting as that career ending felt, as identity confusing as that termination proved to be, that empty space in your schedule was necessary for what was coming, essential for the work you were actually called to do, required for the purpose God was revealing that couldn't manifest while that job still consumed 40+ hours per week of your time, energy, focus. Then came the third loss. Your financial security collapsed. Not gradually, suddenly, not with warnings you heeded, with shocking devastation. Maybe it was investment failure that destroyed it. Maybe it was unexpected expense that depleted it. Maybe it was economic crisis that eliminated it. Maybe it was theft that removed it. However it ended completely, stability destroyingly, security eliminatingly. You feared, you worried. You wondered how you'd survive without savings, how you'd manage without reserves, how you'd handle without the financial cushion you'd relied on. But while you were worrying about financial collapse, God was creating faith. That financial security, as comforting as it seemed, was creating false confidence in money instead of genuine trust in God, generating dependence on savings instead of reliance on divine provision, producing faith in bank account instead of faith in heavenly supply. That wealth, as substantial as it appeared, was becoming your source instead of God being your source, your provider instead of heaven being your provider, your security instead of divine faithfulness being your security. God removed it to make room, not to impoverish you, but to reveal that your provision doesn't come from what you save but from who you serve, doesn't flow from what you accumulate but from whom you trust, doesn't arrive from what you stockpile but from whose promises you believe. And as devastating as that financial loss was, as security destroying as that wealth elimination felt, as stability removing as that collapse proved to be, that empty space in your financial confidence was necessary for faith development, essential for trust building, required for learning that divine provision operates independently of human accumulation. Then came the fourth loss. Your health declined. Not gradually, rapidly, not with symptoms you ignored, with crisis you couldn't deny. Maybe it was diagnosis that revealed it. Maybe it was accident that caused it. Maybe it was condition that emerged suddenly. Maybe it was breakdown that manifested unexpectedly. However it manifested completely, life-alteringly, assumption-destroyingly. You suffered, you struggled. You wondered why God allowed sickness, why heaven permitted pain, why divine healing wasn't manifesting immediately. But while you were struggling with health crisis, God was creating dependence. That health, as stable as it seemed, was being taken for granted instead of recognized as gift, assumed as permanent instead of appreciated as daily miracle, treated as automatic instead of received as divine provision. That strength, as reliable as it appeared, was making you independent instead of dependent on God, self-sufficient instead of heaven-reliant, autonomous instead of divinely connected for every breath, every heartbeat, every moment of continued existence. God removed it to make room, not to kill you, but to remind you that life itself is gift, that breath is divine provision, that existence is heavenly grace given, moment by moment, sustained continuously, maintained perpetually by forces beyond your control, beyond your creation, beyond your maintenance. And as physically devastating as that health crisis was, as pain-filled as that sickness proved, as frightening as that diagnosis became, that empty space where health confidence existed was necessary for creating gratitude, essential for building dependence, required for learning that every healthy moment is miracle, every pain-free day is gift, every functioning body part is divine grace. Then came the fifth loss. Your plans collapsed, not gradually, instantly, not with alternatives available, with complete derailment. Maybe it was circumstance that prevented them. Maybe it was others' choices that blocked them. Maybe it was timing that missed them. Maybe it was obstacles that destroyed them. However they collapsed completely, future devastatingly, direction removingly. You despaired, you confused, You wondered what purpose your life had without the plans you'd made, what direction you'd go without the roadmap you'd designed, what future you'd have without the blueprint you'd created. But while you were despairing about collapsed plans, God was creating openness. Those plans, as good as they seemed, were limiting your future to what you could imagine, restricting your possibilities to what you could conceive, confining your destiny to what you could design with limited knowledge, finite wisdom, human perspective. Those dreams, as inspiring as they appeared, were actually scaled-down versions of divine intention, reduced expressions of heavenly planning, minimized manifestations of what God intended that exceeded anything you could ask or think or plan or imagine. God removed them to make room, not to leave you directionless, but to redirect you toward paths you hadn't considered, possibilities you hadn't imagined, destinies you hadn't conceived because they were too big, too significant, too magnificent for human planning, human designing, human blueprinting. And as disorienting as those collapsed plans were, as direction-removing as those destroyed dreams felt, as future-confusing as those derailed designs proved to be, that empty space where your plans existed was necessary for God's plans to emerge, essential for heaven's designs to manifest, required for divine purposes to unfold that couldn't happen while you were still committed to your plans, still pursuing your designs, still following your blueprints. Now let me show you exactly what God is bringing into the space created by these losses, what's coming into the room made by these removals, what's filling the capacity generated by these endings. First, God is bringing aligned relationships, relationships that actually support your destiny instead of distract from it, that genuinely celebrate your growth instead of feel threatened by it, that really participate in your elevation instead of try to prevent it. These relationships won't be like what you lost. They'll be better. Not because the people are better humans, but because the alignment is better fit. These coming relationships will match where you're going instead of where you were, align with who you're becoming instead of who you were, correspond with what you're called to accomplish instead of what you used to do. They'll add to your life instead of drain from it, give more than they take, build more than they consume. They'll be easy relationships instead of difficult ones, life-giving connections instead of life-draining attachments, mutually beneficial bonds instead of one-sided dependencies. But they couldn't come while old relationships still occupied the space, still consumed the time, still drained the energy needed for these new relationships to form, develop, thrive. Second, God is bringing true calling work. Work that actually aligns with your purpose instead of just pays your bills, that genuinely expresses your gifts instead of just utilizes your skills, that really fulfills your mission instead of just occupies your time. This work won't be like the job you lost. It'll be better, not because it necessarily pays more initially, but because it matters more eternally. Not because it's easier necessarily, but because it's more meaningful essentially. This coming work will wake you up excited instead of dreading the day, will energize you instead of exhaust you, will fulfill you instead of drain you. It'll be work you do even without pay because it's so aligned with who you are, so connected to what you're called to do, so integrated with your actual purpose that it won't feel like work at all, but like destiny unfolding, calling, manifesting, purpose expressing itself through what you do daily. But it couldn't come while old jobs still consumed your time, still occupied your schedule, still channeled your energy towards someone else's dream instead of your own calling. Third, God is bringing supernatural provision. Provision that flows from divine source instead of human effort alone, that comes through channels you didn't create, that arrives in ways you didn't plan, that manifests through means you didn't arrange. This provision won't be like the financial security you lost. It'll be better. Not because the amounts are necessarily larger, but because the source is infinitely more reliable. This coming provision will teach you that God's supply isn't limited by your savings, isn't restricted by your income, isn't confined by your employment, isn't dependent on your effort alone but flows from divine faithfulness, arrives through heavenly promises, manifests via supernatural means that operate independently of human systems while also working through human systems when appropriate. This provision will come right on time repeatedly, arrive precisely when needed consistently, manifest exactly as required perpetually. But it couldn't come while old financial security still created false confidence, still generated independence, still produced trust in accumulation instead of trust in God. Fourth, God is bringing divine health. Health that comes from divine source and divine healing instead of just human medicine and human strength. That manifests through supernatural intervention as well as natural recovery. That arrives via heavenly grace, not just earthly treatment. This health won't be like the health you lost or health you took for granted. It'll be better. Not because you'll never be sick, but because you'll never forget that health is gift, that wellness is grace, that every functioning body part is miracle. This coming health will be received gratefully instead of assumed automatically, appreciated daily instead of taken for granted, recognized as divine provision instead of human entitlement. You'll thank God for every healthy day, praise heaven for every pain-free moment, worship for every normal function you previously didn't notice. And this grateful health consciousness produces better health care of yourself, wiser choices about yourself, greater stewardship of the body temple housing your spirit. But this health consciousness couldn't come while old health created presumption, generated assumption, produced taking for granted what should have been appreciated as continuous miracle. Fifth, God is bringing divine direction. Direction that comes from God's plans instead of just your plans, that flows from heaven's designs instead of only your designs, that arrives through divine revelation instead of purely human reasoning. This direction won't be like the plans you lost. It'll be better. Not because it's easier necessarily, but because it's divinely designed specifically for you, heaven crafted particularly for your calling, God tailored exactly for your purpose. This coming direction will lead you to places you never considered, opportunities you never imagined, destinies you never conceived because they're too big for human planning, too significant for human designing, too magnificent for human conceiving. This divine direction will unfold step by step, reveal itself progressively, manifest itself sequentially as you walk in obedience, trust in faithfulness, move in confidence that God who called you will guide you, heaven that purposed you will direct you. Divine plan that included you will manifest through you. But this direction couldn't come while old plans still dominated your thinking, still controlled your actions, still directed your steps toward good instead of toward great. Let me tell you what you need to do while waiting for what's coming to arrive, while the room being made is still empty, while the space being created is still vacant. First, resist the urge to refill the space prematurely. Don't rush to replace what was removed. Don't hurry to refill what was emptied. Don't scramble to reoccupy what was vacated. The empty space is uncomfortable. The vacant room feels wrong. The open capacity seems wasteful. But that discomfort, that feeling, that seeming is exactly why most people never receive what God prepared, because they refill the space before what God intended can arrive. Stay empty for the season. Stay open during the waiting. Stay available through the process. Don't grab the first relationship that presents itself to fill relational emptiness. Don't take the first job offered to eliminate unemployment anxiety. Don't rush into anything just to feel full again, secure again, settled again. The emptiness is temporary. The vacancy is seasonal. The openness is purposeful. What God is bringing is worth the wait, worth the discomfort, worth the season of emptiness between what left and what's coming. Second, use the empty space for healing. The losses left wounds. The removals created pain. The endings caused trauma. Use this empty season for healing before the next full season begins. Process the grief. Feel the pain. Acknowledge the loss. Don't rush past healing into the next thing. Heal first, then fill. Recover first, then receive. Restore first, then reload. The empty space isn't just for making room for more, it's also for healing from what was, recovering from who hurt you, restoring from what damaged you so you don't carry wounds into what's coming. Healed people receive better than wounded people. Restored souls steward better than damaged souls. Recovered hearts love better than broken hearts. Use this empty season for healing. See counselors if needed. Process with trusted friends. Journal through the pain. Pray through the grief. Worship through the loss. Let the empty space be healing space before it becomes filled space. What's coming deserves your healed self, your restored soul, your recovered heart, not your wounded self, your damaged soul, your broken heart. Third, use the empty space for preparation. What's coming will require different skills, new capacities, additional preparation you didn't need for what you had. Use this empty season for developing what you'll need, learning what you'll require, preparing for what's arriving. Take classes, read books, develop skills, build capacities, prepare for more. The empty space isn't just waiting space, it's preparation space, development space, growth space for becoming ready for what's coming that's bigger than what left, greater than what was removed, more demanding than what ended. People who waste empty seasons on grief alone without also using them for preparation often aren't ready when what's coming arrives. They receive it but can't steward it. They get it but can't maintain it. They obtain it but can't handle it. Don't waste your empty season. Grieve, yes, but also prepare. Heal, yes, but also develop. Process, yes, but also grow. What's coming is worth preparing for, worth developing toward, worth growing into, so when it arrives, you're ready to receive it, steward it, maximize it. Fourth, worship through the waiting. Don't wait until what's coming arrives to praise. Worship now. Thank God now. Praise heaven now for what's coming, even though you can't see it yet, even though you don't have it yet, even though it hasn't manifested yet. Worship in the empty space. Praise in the vacant room. Thank God in the open capacity. Your worship in the waiting demonstrates faith in the promise, trust in the giver, confidence in divine timing. Worship in waiting also shifts your focus from what you lost to what you're gaining, from past that's gone to future that's coming, from emptiness that is to fullness that will be. Worship changes your perspective, transforms your attitude, renews your mind. Worship in the waiting. Praise in the process. Thank God in the transition. Your worship during empty season prepares you to steward filled season, positions you to receive what's coming, develops you into person capable of handling more than you lost. Fifth, help others who are losing everything. Your loss qualifies you to help others losing similarly. Your removal experience equips you to guide others being removed. Your ending story encourages others facing endings. Don't waste your pain on yourself alone. Use your pain to help others in pain. Share your story with those in similar stories. Encourage people walking where you walked. Your testimony becomes their hope. Your survival becomes their possibility. Your perspective about loss making room becomes their reframe. Helping others during your empty season also keeps you from obsessing about your own emptiness, from fixating on your own vacancy, from consuming yourself with your own loss. When you help others, you participate in filling their emptiness, which paradoxically helps fill yours, in replacing their loss, which mysteriously helps replace yours, in giving to them, which spiritually brings to you. Help others. Share your story. Encourage the grieving. Your loss isn't wasted if it helps others survive their losses. So, chosen one, you lost everything. Your relationships, your job, your financial security, your health, your plans, everything gone, removed, ended. And in those losses, you experienced devastation, grief, pain, confusion, despair. You questioned God. You wondered why. You felt abandoned, forgotten, forsaken. But you weren't being punished. You were being positioned. You weren't being destroyed. You were being developed. You weren't being diminished. You were being expanded. God was making room for more than you lost, for better than you had, for greater than you imagined, for relationships aligned with destiny, for work expressing calling, for provision from divine source, for health appreciated as gift, for direction designed by God. All of this is coming into the room made by losses, into the space created by removals, into the capacity generated by endings. What's coming is worth what you lost, exceeds what you had, surpasses what you planned. Hold on during the empty season. The room is being made, the space is being created, the capacity is being developed. What's coming will fill that room completely. Occupy that space appropriately, maximize that capacity fully. You lost everything because God was making room for more, not just more of same, more of better. Not just more quantity, more quality, not just more things. More purpose, more calling, more destiny, more divine design than you had before losses began, than you possessed before removals started, than you enjoyed before endings commenced. Your losses were strategic. Your removals were purposeful. Your endings were necessary to make room for what couldn't come while you still held what needed to go. While you still maintained what needed to end, while you still pursued what needed to conclude. You lost everything because God was making room for more, and that more is worth the loss, worth the wait, worth the empty season between what left and what's coming. You lost everything because God was making room for more. This is your truth, this is your reality, this is your testimony. Loss creating space for gain, removal creating room for arrival. Ending creating capacity for beginning of more than you lost, better than you had, greater than you imagined. Forever.